Species. To the surprise of many, species is actually not a well-defined term. A simple definition is that a species is a group of organisms that are capable of interbreeding in the wild and producing fertile offspring. So there are three criteria. 1, they must be able to interbreed. 2, it must occur in the wild. And 3, the offspring must be fertile. Take, for example, a donkey and a horse. Although they are able to reproduce, a mule is incapable of reproducing. Hence, horses and donkeys are considered different species. The problem with this is that there are organisms that reproduce asexually, which require another set of definitions. Even for sexually reproducing animals, this can be an issue. For example, man's best friend, are they considered one species? Definitely. However, if a simian flu were to wipe out all the small to extra large dogs, we could immediately classify them as two different species if we refer to our definition. Because surely there is a size issue when it comes to reproduction between a Scooby-Doo and a pocket-sized Snoopy. So how do different species come about? It is because all the intermediates have died off. It is the same scenario in the wild. If we look at the family tree of horses, donkeys, and zebras, we can see that donkeys and zebras shared a common ancestor, just as all dogs share a common ancestor, also known as an ancient wolf. In between, there are many generations of intermediates, and all of them are dead. Therefore, they are considered different species. The same applies to horses. They share a common ancestor with the common ancestor of donkeys and zebras. The intermediates have unfortunately also died out, because aging is actually a thing. But how did they become somewhat different in appearance from one another? That is because of natural selection. For natural selection to take place, differences or variations between individuals are necessary. Let's compare two mice. Which is cuter? You can't really select, can you? Because they are mirror images of each other. What about this pair of mice? Which one is cuter? In the second pair, there is variation, and hence meaningful selection can take place. Variation can be classified into three categories. Continuous variation exists when there is a range, such as with height, weight, and skin colour. These traits are usually controlled by many genes and have an additive effect, meaning that two genes might combine to make you more muscular. These variations are also normally affected by the environment, such as how tan your skin becomes depending on sun exposure. The other group is discontinuous variation, where phenotypes are categorical, meaning you are one thing or another. For example, double or single eyelids. You can't have 3.14 eyelids. Gender is also a discontinuous phenotype, either one or the other. It is controlled by one or a few genes with no additive effect, as there is no booster that allows you to be, for instance, a Sigma male without being affected by environmental factors, unless you are in South Korea. Some variations can be both continuous and discontinuous. Remember I mentioned that height is continuous variation. If you recall Mendel's pea plants, he classified them as tall or short. While height is generally a continuous trait in humans, there is a condition known as dwarfism that causes a person to be significantly shorter than average. Hence, height can be both continuous and discontinuous. So what causes variation in individuals? Dwarfism is caused by a dominant allele and is often due to a mutation in genes. Mutation is a sudden, random change in the sequence base of a gene or in the number of chromosomes. This gives rise to different forms of the same gene, which can result in variation. An example of a change in the number of chromosomes is the case of Down's syndrome, while mutation in genes causes conditions such as sickle cell anemia, albinism, and various cancers. Mutation occurs randomly at a very low rate, but there are factors that can increase the chance of mutation in DNA, such as ionizing radiation, chemical mutagens, for example, tar found in cigarette smoke, viruses, and ultraviolet light. For Down syndrome, you just have to know that individuals have an extra copy of chromosome 21 that most likely originated from the egg. An example of a condition caused by a single gene mutation is sickle cell anemia. This mutation affects the solubility of hemoglobin, resulting in the cells clumping together and causing the red blood cells to become sickle-shaped. This lowers the oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells and also causes an increased chance of blocking blood vessels. All of this sounds bad, but in areas where malaria is rampant, heterozygous individuals are more resistant to the parasite, which is a good example where a negative phenotype provides a survival advantage. Mutation can be harmful or beneficial, and a beneficial mutation can be harmful in a different or new environment. When an offspring gains a beneficial mutation which gives it a beneficial trait, such as antibiotic resistance, it is more likely to survive and pass down copies of this allele to the F2 generation. However, mutation is not the main reason for variation. The main reason for variation among individuals of the same species is actually the randomness during meiosis and fertilization. Events during meiosis are actually the main contributing factors for variation in gametes. Crossing over, whereby homologous chromosomes randomly exchange genetic material, is the appetizer. The main course is the independent assortment of chromosomes. Your father has 23 chromosomes inherited from your grandfather and 23 chromosomes inherited from your grandmother. The homologous chromosomes will randomly distribute themselves. For example, in one manner they divide themselves into different gametes, so that one gamete will have a combination of one set of chromosomes, while the other gamete will have the opposite set. Other combinations are also possible, reflecting the different ways homologous chromosomes can split. Given the number of permutations possible with 23 chromosomes, the number of variations is definitely over 9,000. Lastly, the fusion of gametes during fertilization also adds to the variation. While siblings can look similar, there is still variation in their appearance, and because of this variation, meaningful selection can occur under selection pressure. Factors that influence the chance of whether a set of genes, which is a fancy way of saying an organism, are passed on are known as selection pressures. Besides surviving, an organism must also be able to mate and reproduce. Hence, sexual selection is part of natural selection. The list of environmental factors is non-exhaustive and is not limited to 6 factors, such as predators, parasites, competition among the same species, disease, changing environment, and geographic separation. The ability to attract the opposite sex and mating preferences contribute to factors affecting sexual selection. All of these factors will contribute to natural selection. Natural selection is actually quite easy to understand. Creatures that are most adapted or best fitted to their environment, such as having a better ability to find food and avoid being eaten, will survive. That's why there is the saying, survival of the fittest, where fit refers to fitting in. Can you see the bug? Can you see the lizard? Here is another insect and another lizard. Is this bird poo? And is this the end of a tree trunk? While this is a slug, how do you think it looks right side up? And those that are better at attracting mates will be able to pass on their desirable traits to their offspring. The next generation will also have variation, and those that are even more adapted will pass down an even more desirable set of genes. The appearance of the organism might change over time due to the selection process. Let's look at a case study. One fine day, a group of finches found themselves being carried by the wind to an island. Wonderful. There was plenty of food and no predators. Hence, their numbers multiplied rapidly. However, due to the increase in population, food became limited. Luckily, there was variation, specifically differences in their beaks. Some birds were better at catching worms, while others were better at digging into fruits and nuts. They each found their own niche, and compared to birds that did not specialize, they avoided excessive competition and were able to find sufficient food. Not only that, birds with the same beak type also mated together. Slight differences between individuals provide a selective advantage for those with the better trait in a given environment. An individual can compete better than others, thereby increasing its chance of survival and passing on the beneficial genes. After several generations, if the beneficial trait is constantly selected, the offspring might be grossly different from an individual with a common ancestor living in another environmental condition. The difference between the nutcracker and the worm catcher became so great that they were no longer able to mate with each other. Different species emerged as a result. In summary, events such as crossing over, independent assortment of chromosomes, fertilization and mutation lead to variation in offspring. With selection pressure and reproductive isolation, new species can arise when intermediate forms die off.